Hey folks, welcome back to Indaba Africa. Good afternoon, wherever you find yourself. Good evening in parts of Africa. Welcome, whether you're coming from the Great White North up there in Canada, you find yourself a little further south in Mexico, or somewhere in the Caribbean basin. Perhaps you're tuning in from the Republic of Ireland, perhaps out in the Gaeltacht in Western Ireland, maybe Galway. Hey, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Or perhaps Dublin. Be sure to drop by Guinness and have a pint for me if you're in Dublin. And folks in the United Kingdom, whether it's Northern Ireland, on the other side of the Emerald Isle, or up there in the Highlands of Scotland, perhaps down there in Snowdonia in Wales, or somewhere in England, maybe in Kent, where my ancestors came from in 1621, quite a while ago. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Folks out in Australasia, the Kiwis and the Aussies, welcome into this stream today. We have a special guest today on my regular Saturday live stream, and I'll be introducing him in just a moment. Just a little more introductions and saying hello to folks around the world. But whether you're in Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, Taiwan, all places people tune into Chris White Africa, thank you so much for joining us today. Excited to have you here, and I'm excited about my guest. He's rather engaging, and we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic in just a moment. So thank you all. And now, Africa. Wherever you find yourself in Africa, folks, in the places where I've lived and worked, and the places I've enjoyed: Tunisia, Liberia, Botswana, Malawi, Nigeria, Mauritania, Uganda, Ethiopia. Whew, that's a lot. Welcome, everybody. Dumela, Botswana. Otsihilijan. Sawubona, South Africa. How is everybody doing today? Well, we're going to bring my guest in just a moment. Gideon is my guest. He's a commercial airline pilot who looks like he's out of that industry now thanks to lockdown restrictions and what it's doing. We're going to talk briefly about commercial aviation. That wasn't the topic, but I think it'll be interesting to you to learn a little bit about that from Gideon. And then after that, we're going to move on to talk about gun rights, gun safety, gun responsibility, the right to keep and bear arms, and compare and contrast events in South Africa with those that take place in the United States, where we have a federal system. And so we're going to talk about that. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring him in now. Now, my apologies to you Afrikaans speakers, because I have a real hard time pronouncing Gideon in Afrikaans because your G is difficult. So my apologies in advance. Gideon does not take offense, so I ask that you don't. So I will not be saying Gideon all the time. That's a little hard for me. So welcome, Gideon, to the channel. Here he comes. There he is.
Hello.
Hey, how's it?
Very, very good, and it's nice to be back. Well, being on your channel for the first time, but back out of the waiting room. Hello, Chris.
Yeah, exactly. That's for clarification. Yeah, what I do is I put my guests in the waiting room, not because they misbehaved and they need a timeout, but just so that we can do the introductions, because I find it's a little awkward to make somebody sit there just kind of stare stone-faced at you as you introduce them. So this is the greatest man since sliced bread, and he's wonderful. And you're the guest. You're like, okay, do I just sit here? Anyway, Gideon, welcome to the stream.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for seeing it up and inviting me. And I've been looking forward to this conversation, Chris. Thank you.
No, it's my pleasure. I saw you, I think, on Roman's channel. Is that where I may have seen you the first time? I'm trying to remember.
It's possible. I cross-pollinated a bit between Roman and Jeremy and a few others. So yes, yeah, no, I think quite likely.
Actually, Jeremy might have been the first place I saw it. But I never know, because I get drunk vicariously by watching Jeremy on his streams. So I might have been a little loopy that day, a little pissed, and didn't catch it if it was that channel or Roman's. But anyway, inside joke, which is not that inside. But anyway, he was my guest yesterday, by the way. He was on the channel. I understand he left my channel and went to your channel.
Oh, jeepers. Okay, yeah, then he joined. We have a thing we do every Friday called Whiskey Friday, which starts at 8 p.m. That's a new time slot. And so that's why he was slightly late, because he dialed out with you and then dialed straight in.
but your program starts at the top of the hour, doesn't it?
It does.
Oh, so did he come in if it was already a half hour old, or did he come in?
No. He came in, but we were all kind of ready for him, and he came in about 2 minutes before it kicked off.
Okay, that's what I thought, because there was an hour between our streams, but we went for an extra half hour. So he has no excuse. He had a full 33 minutes to show up for your stream. So we'll have to give Jeremy a little hard time about that. So anyway. So Gideon,
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think it's very fair. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about you. So as I understand, you've been a commercial airline pilot, and you've worked on a number of different aircraft, and most recently on a 737-800 model, I believe.
I did. That was the previous model or type that I was on, was the 737-800 low-cost carrier in SA. Prior to that, the MD-80 series for about 4 years, which I quite enjoyed. And then before that, it was the King Air 200s and Beechcraft 1900s. And if anyone in the comment section is a bit of an aviation geek, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. For those who aren't, those are the twin turboprops that, you see quite a few of them around Lancia.
Yeah, some of those
and
smaller
Johannesburg.
aircraft are
Yeah.
great, and of course, some of them are ubiquitous in Africa. When I was tasked to come up with some reconnaissance and some transport and VIP aircraft for Africa, my answer was the Cessna Caravan 208. That's a great platform for that sort of thing, and they're all over because of tourism. You have them all over Africa.
Oh, they're awesome. I think one of my favorite flights I ever did was in a caravan, where we had to get journalists to hook up with Kingsley Holgate. He was driving around Africa at the time, distributing mosquito nets, and we had to get them to a town in northern Mozambique before sunset. Um, and we had a set of GPS coordinates and a rough map to tell us where to land. What they didn't tell us ahead of the time is that the airstrip was actually the main road going through the middle of this town. It was just a dusty road. And
well, you should have called me. I could have told you that.
Exactly. And you're running out of daylight, and you have to you've got one shot to buzz the place to warn everyone to please get off. And then you have to land, and you have to ditch them, and you have to get airborne again before you can't see anything anymore. And that was a lot of fun. And the Caravan was just made it so easy. It's such a forgiving airplane. It's so capable. Awesome piece of equipment.
Not really. So, not to get too far away from the subject of guns and weapons, but just curious, what got you into aviation? Did something you always wanted to do? I mean, a lot of people, they just always want to be a pilot, or they were in the military and they're a pilot. So, what got you into aviation?
It was basically something I always wanted to do, and I think a lot of it stemmed from childhood, where my dad was always quite an aviation enthusiast, but he's a medical doctor, so he never flew ever in his life. But I kind of became interested in it, and he was always very supportive of it, and I was very fortunate to be able to pursue it, the training, and then as a career afterwards. Unfortunately, that's kind of fallen by the wayside now, but that's not by anyone's planning.
No, you're not talking about the ban on air travel by the National Coronavirus Command Council. That wouldn't be the topic, would it?
Oh yeah, no. When it comes to the NCCCP, they should just have added that. Definitely due to them, but not due to planning from my side. No.
Yeah. No, in fact, not to get into it, because there's a lot of videos on my channel, content about South African Airways and about Comair as well. But a lot of people, this is a question, you're out of it now, but I mean, at some point, if I could delve into this very quickly, but you and I were chatting beforehand, I said one of the points I made is that, knowing a little bit about the aviation industry, is that pilots that aren't current can't get back in the air. And you can't just go in a simulator and be qualified to get back behind the stick and take it off with a plane. So, which you always have to have are instructor pilots, but instructor pilots have to fly themselves. And now the instructor pilots aren't flying by and large. So what's going to happen? I mean, we're going to have mid-air mishaps. We just had one take place here in the States. Two firefighting aircraft hit each other mid-air. Now that's a little different. They're obscured by smoke and that sort of thing. But nonetheless, I have some very serious concerns about when all these pilots get back in the air.
Well, there's a whole bunch of things. Now, if you think about some airlines out there, who I won't have to name names,
we'll figure it out.
It's not Sapphire, by the way. Okay. It's one of the other ones. Are paying their airline captains about 5,700 Rand, 5,000, not even, about 5,000 Rand a month. That's all they can afford to pay them. These guys are still going to work for this amount of money. Working part-time behind the counter in a gun store, I earn about the same at present. And have to think about the psychological stress these people are under, in the sense that they can't keep roofs over their head, they can't feed their families. A lot of them are being evicted. Their personal relationships, thanks to this whole lockdown, have probably gone down the tubes. And you're putting them in charge of a $75 million piece of equipment with 186 people on board, and you're expecting them to operate under sometimes difficult circumstances with technical problems. You're asking for trouble with this. The industry needs to understand very carefully that if there is a mishap and there's an investigation as to what sort of support the software got, and by software I'm talking about the people. The hardware might be well looked after. In fact, airlines usually look after their capital equipment very well because it costs money, but all of them are not particularly good at looking after their human capital, and that's going to be a major issue, I think, definitely.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's not just in aviation. We're going to shift from that now, and I think I'm going to invite you to come back if you don't mind to talk about your aviation experiences. I think it'd be a fascinating show. It's an interesting area, so you don't have to commit to that, but I'll ask you later, assuming the stream goes well. But
Yeah.
no, but you always reserve the right not to do that. But no, yeah. So we'll shift to guns, and before we get into the conversation about weapons, there's a comment here from Morton Christie already. It says, "Hello. Don't like this Oak." I think he said Oak on either Germ or Roman. I heard him bad mouthing the M1911 Alpha 1 and their owners. Not cool. Anyway, I'm not sure what that was. I missed that conversation. I don't know if you want to comment on that. Morton is a.
I was about to say, I never recall saying anything.
Now, don't chase my subscribers away. He's a dedicated subscriber and viewer. So, but anyway, did you say that, or was it misinterpreted?
No, I don't recall ever saying anything bad about the M1911. In fact, I would love to own one. I wouldn't necessarily make it my carry gun per se, but that's only due to the other considerations. But I definitely have a soft spot for the 1911, most certainly.
All right, cool beans. Okay, so listen, you live in South Africa, you're in the Western Cape, that's right?
Cape Town, yes.
Okay, all right. Well, that's in the Western Cape. Some Americans know geography, man. no, I'm just teasing. But seriously, okay. So you're in South Africa. Not exactly an easy place to keep and own and maintain a firearm. The ruling party has made it quite a challenge to keep your firearm registered, to get the forms, to go through the checks and all that. So with all those challenges, why are you a gun enthusiast, and how did you get into it? Because you just got a job in a gun shop, or you got to the gun shop because you're a gun enthusiast?
Well, it's kind of was a bit chicken and egg in the sense that I was always getting to what do you call it? My entire journey started from the self-defense point of view. So I felt that whatever I had available at the time before I became a gun owner, which was at a late stage in my life, I was about 24, 25 at the time. I felt that this wasn't sufficient for me to actually defend myself effectively against bad men or bad violent criminals who wanted to do me harm or my fiance or wife harm at the time. I needed something more.
Why that focus? I mean, South Africa is one of the safest places in the world to live. There's no danger there. What are you concerned about?
Absolutely.
Are you just hysterical? What's the problem there? Come on, Gideon.
Yeah, we're only in what was it? The top 7 or top 6 most homicidal nations.
Well, listen, South Africa leads the charts in many categories. It leads the charts in HIV infections, not at the top, but near the top. It's also in the top 5 for COVID-19 confirmed cases. And it's also up there in per 100,000 people murdered. Rather sad. But anyway, sorry to distract, but I just felt it was important to make sure that my audience outside South Africa was aware of why that was important.
No, exactly. No, it's important to understand that it's as far as violent interpersonal crime is concerned, it's a real issue. And prior to me actually becoming a gun owner, I was involved in 2 really bad violent crime situations that I managed to get myself out of. But ultimately, I did not feel empowered after succeeding in that. I felt like, okay, I got more lucky than anything else. And I don't think any person who really gets involved in a situation like that, even if they're armed with a firearm, feels, oh wow, I had everything under control. That's not how it goes. But there was a definite lack. Your mindset is there, and to a degree that my training was lacking at the time that I could do something about. But ultimately, the equipment, the third pillar, needed to feed into it as well. Mm-hmm. And I went through the whole process to become declared competent, because that's how it works here. Before you get to own a firearm, you have to go through a whole course, not quite as how shall I put it, as in depth as a CCW permit course in the States, mm-hmm. but not entirely dissimilar. You have to first do that, submit paperwork, wait about 3 months. Then you get something called a competency certificate, a competency card. Now you can go and pick a gun, and you can apply for a license for that specific gun, which expires at some point. And to get that license, you need to submit more paperwork as to why you need it. Fortunately, self-defense is a reason, and motivating why you need it and attaching some crime stats to that piece of paperwork is usually enough. And then you kind of have to figure out, okay, I've got the most basic, most rudimentary training, and I have a firearm now. Now I need to learn how to use this bloody thing. And from there, it's just sort of, you get involved in the community, you learn more about yourself and about how you know absolutely nothing. And it kind of sucks you in, and you become I think you have to be fairly special to not care about your gun rights then, because you've bought into this. You've put a lot of skin in this game, and you definitely don't want the government to take it from you.
So let me get this straight, Gideon. So when as part of the application, you have to give a justification for why you want or need a firearm?
Exactly.
Well, all I have to do is say I want one.
Yeah, which is what happens in a civilized country, right?
Well, not all of them, but many. Why do you want a gun? Because that's enough.
Exactly,
and sec.
And I mean, like, there's a lot of people, especially in other the G8 or G11 nations, that point fingers at the states for the murder rate and the fact that you guys don't have gun control. Well, of course the states has gun controls. I mean, look at California, look at DC, look at a lot of the more prohibitive states with their stupid ideas, New York, New Jersey. What my counter argument to that always is if the United States, if guns were a problem in the US, considering that I think there are more firearms than people in the States.
Could be. There's more automobiles than there are people.
Oh, well, that's true. Well, the firearm ownership in the US is beautifully prolific. And my argument is it is such an outlier with the rate of civilian gun ownership. If the guns were the problem, you would know about it by now.
There would be 250,000 murders per year by handguns if guns were the problem, easily, with 330 million people and 150 million gun owners. Come on, this is ludicrous, these arguments.
Yeah, and I mean, if you just look at DC's homicide rate, intentional homicide rate, or whatever you want to call it, I think it's the worst out of the. I mean, it's not treated as a separate state, although it might now well be, but it's so off the charts. Yet, as a civilian living in DC, I don't know what it is at the moment, but for a very long period of time, you couldn't get a handgun. You couldn't legally carry one.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can now, but it's the same issues with Chicago. It's the same issues with many of the metros where the most murder is. The common denominator is prohibitive gun control.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. Where you disarm people, it's and so of course the mayor of London, the progressive gentleman that he is, decided that they not only banned guns, but they banned knives. You can't have a knife because they banned guns, and then the gangs and the criminal syndicates and the criminals just started murdering people with knives in a much more brutal fashion, up close and personal, and it got out of control. So now they arrest you for having knives in London. What's next? For breathing oxygen, because carbon dioxide is a poisonous gas.
Yeah, and knife crime, or so-called knife-related crime, has, I don't have the articles on hand, but there's been a huge spike of it, even with the prohibitive measures that are taken. And the thing that people seem to lose sight of is that, firstly, legislating prohibitive laws pertaining to objects or substances does not modify people's behavior. That's the first problem. And the second one, all that does is you just increase the amount of innocent people that you criminalize effectively for victimless crimes by just being in possession of something when a officer of the law deems it to be not appropriate. Mm-hmm. The amount of discretionary power that's given to law enforcement officers, and then expecting them not to abuse it in places like that, is just off the charts bad. It just, no.
No, I always find it fascinating how people who are in love with criminals absolutely do everything they can. So New York State now has eliminated bail. So if you're brought in charged with murder, you can walk out the door. Okay, no harm, no foul.
Okay.
It's just insane. Yeah. Well, New York City, no one's held. You're released. There's no bail. So that happens. Yeah, go ahead.
So if you carry more than 7 rounds in your magazine in New York City, can you get arrested, just walk out? Does that count for those offenses as well?
Well, they do arrest people and they process them, but they don't get held pending a hearing, and they don't get held. I mean, normally if someone's accused of a heinous crime, if there's sufficient evidence to give the judge reason to pause about putting them out in public, being public safety, you put bail conditions or you deny bail. Now bail is not even an issue in New York. There's no bail. This is just absolutely insane. So that's one thing. Then we have this situation where for years, because of proposed or supposition on police misconduct, we went to having body cams, and that's become the norm. And the police resisted it because they thought it was going to be used to prosecute them frivolously. And it took a long time to get into the culture of police having the body cams and using them, the dash cams in the cars. And now we find that actually, in the interest of public safety, it's not a bad thing because it protects police officers from malicious behavior when suspects claim they did something. We can see on the camera they didn't. It also polices the police to make sure that they're always professional. But now we see federal judges out in Oregon telling the police that they can't use body cameras because it's a violation of First Amendment rights for citizens, freedom of assembly. That's nonsense, utter nonsense. They love to protect the criminals. Now, they criminalize South Africans for sitting on a beach during lockdown, yet they have the ability to arrest 240,000 South Africans in about 4 weeks for violating the lockdown and turn them into potential criminals, affecting their employment, affecting their ability to travel abroad, and giving them a record for doing nothing illegal around the world.
Exactly.
Yet they can't seem to arrest rapists and murderers and prosecute those crimes or cash in transit heists. It's beyond, not to mention all the illegal guns that are out there.
Well, not even that. I mean, we've had 70 billion rand stolen in irregular government expenditure just this year alone. We've arrested more restaurant owners and surfers than people who committed state capture. So, I mean, talk about
that's actually easy. All you have to do is arrest one person for those things, and you've beat the total for state capture. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not even a challenge.
It's a low bar, to say the least. We laugh about this, but it's really tragic. It's really sad what's happening. So,
no, if we don't laugh, we're going to cry. That's the thing.
No,
we'll get very angry.
I think you're absolutely right. Okay, so you got into this because you were concerned about your own safety and that of your family or your future family. So you're worried about your loved ones, and given the situation, so you wanted this for self-defense, and you got off on that. You got your approval. You're competent. You're not a nutter, so you can have a firearm.
Yeah.
You got your firearm. What was your first firearm? Do you mind sharing that?
It was a Heckler & Koch USP 9, and I still have it. And then from there, I got involved in the sport shooting community and all sorts of stuff. So my collection expanded considerably. A couple of AR-15s, a F and Fallow 2, a Glock 19, Winchester 1300, pump action, and some other toys, which I take to the range as regularly as I can, because there's no point in owning these things if you're not going to have fun with them, at least.
Now,
So
I'm confused, Gideon. Listen, you have to forgive me because I'm inundated with the mainstream media and with the correct thinking in America. I've been told that no one needs an assault rifle. No one needs a semi-automatic weapon. I mean, why would you have such things? Do you want to kill people? What's that all about?
yes, if I think I had lost count of the amount of gongs and steel plates and paper targets I've shot with these things. But unfortunately for the alarmists, up until present, no dead people yet with them. Sorry. I know I'm probably failing miserably at pushing this narrative, and I suppose I'll try harder. I don't know what they want from me.
No, it's ludicrous, the things that people oppose things, the lengths they'll go to delegitimize them. I made a video last night because kind of like Ronaldo Host does in his channel, where he does the mean comments. I decided, because a couple videos I just did, the one on Sia Khaleesi and the one on There Are No Farm Murders in South Africa, seems to have triggered some people who didn't even watch it for the most part. So I just read through some of the comments, and some guy called me a snowflake last night, and I'm like, no, not a snowflake, still here.
No, I was about to say that doesn't really fit the bill.
No, I think somebody picked up on the wrong terminology there. Okay, so you're into sports shooting. So we have something when I was a kid here in the States we called a turkey shoot. I don't know if you're familiar with turkey shoots.
No, please tell me, because I might be, but maybe just under different terminology.
Here's a little secret. There's no turkeys involved. It's just called a turkey shoot. So what you do is you go to a range, and it's a competition. And so you shoot at targets, and it's just called a turkey shoot. And that's just a nickname for it. It's a pretty popular thing. I did a lot when I was a kid, and I did pretty well. I was pretty proficient with firearms. So you can do it with sidearms, handguns. You can also do it with rifles, and sometimes even shotguns for certain ranges. But mostly rifles and handguns. And we call it a turkey shoot. It's just a normal part of growing up, and and something you do. So anyway, when you say turkey shoot, people know what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, then I've participated in a fair amount of turkey shoots and other related stuff, and I think that's really what it's all about. Is firstly you stay proficient, you become more skilled and accurate, and you're having a great time, and you get to interact with other members of the community, especially newbies. That's one thing that I really enjoy more than anything else. At a stage was taking people who had absolutely no idea how guns work and say, okay, cool. Let's go in a very controlled, safe environment, and let me introduce you to this, and then you're going to shoot this thing at stuff that are, targets, and then you tell me what you think. And that has been for me, the golden method, or the so-called golden bullet at converting people from either being kind of against it or on the fence, not really sure, or a little bit scared of it, and you just give them a gentle nudge and help them through, hold their hand a bit. And I've never had a bad comeback from that. Not once.
Now, there's just a few good comments, but let me get this one so it doesn't slide away very quickly. So Tion asked a question. He said, are you planning to return to airlines after lockdown?
I would like to a degree. I've got a job waiting for me at one of the other carriers, but this is subject to them getting back to 100% capacity, and goodness knows how long that's going to take. There's a lot of stuff up in there. So I would like to, but I'm not planning on it. I'm not bargaining on it at this stage. I'm paving my own way forward, driving my own brand, making other plans to generate reliable income and that sort of stuff. So at the moment, look, it would be cool. I'd like to fly airplanes again, but I don't know if it's going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately.
Funny you should mention generating revenue. Folks, the Chris Wyatt memberships are open. If you want to become a member of the channel, just push the join button down there. If you're in South Africa, it's only R9.99 a month. That's after taxes and YouTube's cut. That makes about 32 cents for me per membership. But feel free to become a member, and the super chat's open if you'd like to do that. Let me say something about bringing new people into firearms, and then I want to read a couple comments. Okay, so for me, introducing someone to firearms is an exciting but a scary thing at the same time. because it's exciting to introduce someone to something that's important, and they need to understand, respect, and learn how to use it properly. And it's nice to be able to teach someone that. But also, some people, they've been watching too much of, what's the online game there? I can't think of that one.
Too much Call of Duty.
Yeah,
way too much.
Not Call of Duty, but the other one, the gangster one there. Where they. But anyway, but too much of that, and they think that's they're waving a fire around all over the place, looking like they're in the Civil War in Liberia with General Buck naked, just running around, pointing it everywhere and shooting. So it's kind of a dual-edged sword when you introduce people to it. You're kind of excited, but you're also a little leery. Do you feel the same way, or am I off base?
No, there is that, but I found a new way to mitigate that. Unfortunately, I don't think. Okay, I don't have it on me, but I've got this. So for those who don't know what this is an SRT or SIRT. It's a laser training pistol. Oh. It has a magazine that comes out that weighs the same as the real thing. It's based on a Glock 17, and it just has a little laser that shoots out. So the cool thing about this is you can take this and you can sit in your house, and you can take someone in your lounge or living room and say, look, I would like to introduce you to the fundamentals of firearm ownership, or how this gun operates. The slide here does a move and all that stuff. But before I unleash you on an actual real gun that's empty, and then we go through some dry fire practice, let's first practice the basics on this thing. And when I'm happy that you fully understand what I'm telling you, then we go a bit further. So it's a bit more time consuming doing it this way. But then by the time you get to the range, they're confident and happy. And that they're not going to do anything too stupid. And you can kind of control how it's going to go down. And then I found little training aids like this have really made my life a lot easier in that regard.
I guess in some
totally
respects,
worth it.
In some respects, it sounded like training wheels, teaching somebody how to ride a bicycle. It's kind of like training wheels.
Exactly.
So what I was trying to remember, and I couldn't because it wasn't, the neurons weren't firing, was Grand Theft Auto. Dogbreaker,
there we go.
Dogbreaker and Corlea said that, yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
All right, so let me bring a couple comments in from the chat here real quick, Gideon. And then, but before I do that, let me just say, folks, as we're approaching 30 minutes into the stream, you're listening to Chris Wyatt Africa on the Indaba Africa channel here on YouTube. This is my regular Saturday live stream. My guest today is Gideon, who's a commercial airline pilot from South Africa, and a gun enthusiast and a gun rights advocate. And we're talking about, we talked a little bit about aviation, but now we're talking about guns. And let me just get some comments in here from the chat. Remember at the beginning of the stream that Morton was not happy about something you said. Yeah. He clarified that. He said that you said that that they were old, extinct, low capacity magazine, heavy, and hard to conceal.
I'm trying to remember where I said that. What if I was making some sort of
Comparison?
tongue-in-cheek comment about what do you call it? The guy from the RR, who carries one actually, Franz Cronje. France is 1911.
Okay.
No, he's the one guy in South Africa I know, and I know there's more than one that actually carries a 1911. And I think it was Ramon or Jeremy asked me, but why wouldn't I advocate carrying it? I said, well, look, if you really want to, you can.
Yeah.
But if you can afford practicing with 45 ACP in the current economy, then that's probably the least of your problems. So I'll be the knuckle dragging Glock carrier and stick to my 9mm P. It's a bit easier to conceal as well, just a little bit.
Yeah, no, well, it's the thing about firearms, this it's like cars and any other thing that people become attached to. Oftentimes, your first love, you stay attached to it, even when something maybe better or more proficient comes along, you stick with that sort of thing. So it's when people get wedded to a certain thing, like I had my 45 in service, and that's what I took in combat the first time. But as I mentioned to somebody on the stream, the upper receiver, I could just do this, and you could see it slide back and forth from side to side. But it fired. It did a fine. It had takedown power, so it was good. But that's what I carried in combat. But later it was the 9mm Beretta after the Army switched contracts.
I remember that.
It was a big deal. It was a big deal. So, but I will say this: I loved having the Beretta. It was fantastic, easy to carry. It was reliable, easy to clean, easy to disassemble, and it had enough, for what I needed. It had enough, power to take people down. So, a couple more comments from the chat. Let me get in here very quickly. So, Eugene Rudman said when I was talking about about how safe it is in South Africa, he said land of peace and love and fluffy things. So I didn't want to miss that. Thank you, Eugene. I said I love sarcasm. And then Yav van Kaal said this: at 4 a.m. this morning, they had a gunfight in his street. All of 15 rounds fired. Criminals ran like jackrabbits. If there weren't guns, we would be burying neighbors now. And I think that's an important point to make, is that without firearms, there'd be a lot more dead South Africans because they can't defend themselves. Like look what happened in the. I love how the press calls it. There was a shooting in a church. No, armed robbers attempted to rob people in a church. And a former police officer, who's the brother of Yusuf van der Westhuizen, apparently is the one who intervened and thwarted that attempt. And those clowns paid with their lives, most of them.
Yeah, it was a 3 versus 1, and the 1-1. So
exactly,
there you go. Like
there's your best argument for the purpose for self-defense.
Absolutely perfect defensive gun use. In my limited experience, that's a win. No, definitely.
I would agree. No, it's something you kind of touched on there. By the way, folks, Gideon is known as Paratus. For those who, I think most people know that, but I just want to share that very quickly. But because I haven't been saying that, I don't want to sell his brand short there. But you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier about when people. And I was yesterday, we wound up in a long stream yesterday. I got Zoom bombed, and those who were there know about it. So anyways, but we were able to cut off pretty quickly. But nonetheless, we wound up going for a long time, and we started talking about guns and gun safety and things. And I shared one of the courses I went through as a military, because I was a high-risk person because of the nature of the things I did. Not because of my actions, but because of who I was. We get training, and one of the trainings we go through is defensive and offensive driving, where we learn how to take a car equipped with anti-lock brakes, which is what all new ones have, and going 50 miles an hour, 80 kilometers an hour, stomp on the brakes, and how you release and stomp so you can control the car to make it go from side to side or to spin around and stuff which is really cool, by the way. That's awesome. And then we also get taught how to ram cars so you can get out of a situation where they're trying to box you in. That's a lot of fun, trust me. And then the coolest part, though, is we got to fire 500 rounds from a 9mm, and my targets were 3 feet or less. Now, the reason I mention that is because people like, going to the range is not the same as personal defense when someone's trying to carjack you. One of my colleagues, who was a lieutenant colonel at the time, I was still I think it was a major or just became lieutenant colonel. He was our defense attaché in Nairobi, and they carjacked him, and he didn't get out of the car fast enough, so they shot him in the stomach. He nearly died. And my point is that's the kind of range we're talking about when someone tries to carjack you or home invasion, and you have the weapon close to you and you have to fire. And being trained, shooting in a silhouette, even if you're trained like this police officer was, Van der Westhuizen, reacting in the moment is a challenge. And so you can never get enough training. You can never get enough familiarization with this. Would you agree with that, or you think that's...
No, absolutely. And I think what a lot of people also misunderstand is they think, okay, marksmanship is the same as fighting. It's not. Being proficient with the tool is great. It's highly important. I mean, you need to understanding basic shooting fundamentals is important. Understanding basic defensive shooting fundamentals, moving, shooting, making use of cover and concealment, all that sort of stuff, and then having more intermediate and advanced skills is important. But ultimately, you also kind of need to know how to fight, and the mindset part is of huge importance. I've seen people with zero training and inferior equipment still succeed at defending themselves very effectively because their mindset was appropriately aggressive at the time. Of course, things could have gone horribly wrong for them because they lacked in the other two aspects, and it could have gone a lot better if they were adequate there. But the mindset part is important. The other thing is you're going to need to understand, like, the defensive driving and offensive driving is super important skill set. And I actually forgot about talking about that because I talk so much about combatives, which we're talking about up close and personal with empty hands, how to get a guy off you, how to create space, how to buy yourself options to deploy whatever other tools you have on you at the time. And if you have to improvise and grab an ashtray and use that, then use it. But the defensive driving part is very applicable in the South African context. And there's other aspects to it as well. Basic trauma or stop the bleed courses, how to patch holes and not just make them, because ultimately you could be the person bleeding. And if you're adequately equipped and trained, you could save your own life or someone else's. So all this sort of stuff's important.
No, absolutely. So there's a couple questions here real quick. Paratus, Let me ask some of these questions of you. Well, make sure we get your brand out there. We don't want to sell you short. Speaking of which, I apologize. I did put a link to your channel in my stream. I'll make sure I do that after the fact so people can find it.
Absolutely not a stress. I could put my hat on and people can know who I am.
Yeah, you have a cool hat, man. Although I'm not going to say when I first saw it, I didn't realize it was a trigger housing. It looked like something dangling from a horse.
Now I'll never be able to unsee it. Thank you.
Now, Paratus will be coming out with a new logo within the week. No, no, but okay. So Tuns, I always pronounce his name wrong because my Afrikaans pronunciation is not very good. But Tuns Rue said that at the risk of repetition, he's asked this in a previous stream of the guest. He wants, what's your opinion on printed guns? Yanni does 3D printing, Yanni Fundeveld, and so he shared his view. What's your take on it? Printed guns.
Well, I think the cool thing about printed firearms is it's finally killed the concept of gun control dead. The politicians must just wake up and figure this out, that you can't stop the signal anymore. It's done. At this stage, sure, the technology isn't quite there, but I've seen there was that AK lower receiver that was printed in the States that seems to work. What do they call it? The Plastikov or something. That was quite interesting. Then there was that 22 caliber one that was printed years ago that was full plastic. That was kind of the first one I saw. And then somebody 3D printed a metal Colt 1911, a full metal gun. And I think the guys at Truth About Guns actually took it to the range and fired it down range, and it worked fine. So sure, the equipment that thing was printed on cost like $600,000, but I mean, technology is advancing all the time. I think ultimately 3D printing firearms is going to become a prolific thing. It's definitely part of the future. It's going to happen.
I think in some respects, honestly, for someone who respects and appreciates and thinks people should have the right to keep and bear arms, that to me is a little bit scary from the standpoint. I would worry about the quality of some of that printing, depending on the resin that was used and that sort of thing, and the thing misfiring or blowing up on someone. Also, the fact that if you can do it at home, then how do you control if the nutters get it or who's a responsible firearm owner? So I think the left ought to focus on those concerns instead of trying to disarm people. But you said something a moment ago there, Gideon, which I don't know if it's from the same reference or it comes from elsewhere, but I don't know if you know the series Firefly. Do you know that?
Yeah, no, it's from Firefly. Yes,
okay, great. So just for people to know that was Mr. Universe said that in the movie Serenity, in which he was not to give the plot away, but he was killed by a bad guy, and he left a recording on his fembot. You can figure out what a fembot is, but he left a recording. He says he was talking to Malcolm Reynolds, Captain America. He says, "Mal, you can't stop the signal." And I think that was the quote. Yes.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly
brilliant. You see that? I love how culture brings people together. I love Firefly. Awesome show. One of my favorite all-time programs. Well done, Gideon. Okay, now you're a friend of the channel. You're welcome back anytime, just because of that.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you.
Now, I do have to do this because we talked about revenue generating things. The Flying Boar has given a super chat, totally unrelated to our conversation, but give me the moment to digress to answer it. Thank you, Flying Boar, for the $5 Canadian super chat. He asked the question, how is Namibia and Botswana's economy doing right now? Well, generally speaking, both are in trouble, especially the Namibian economy, which is heavily dependent on tourism, and there's no international tourism whatsoever there. So they've taken a major hit as a consequence of that. They do have some good signs, though. Just before the lockdown started, Namibia became the first country in Africa ever to export beef to the United States. That's a major coup for them. It took 18 years of negotiation. Did a video on that, by the way, a few months back. Anyway, so that's been helpful in some small respect, and now apparently they're about to ship blueberries out of the country for the first time. So the agriculture sector is helping in some respects. Mining is still occurring, but they are suffering because services are way down and tourism is non-existent. The domestic tourism market is so small as to be irrelevant. Outside of that, Botswana has a lot of challenges too because people aren't buying diamonds. There's no money for diamonds and people aren't shopping by and large. But they've been through this before back in 2008. They addressed it very effectively back then between De Beers and the government of Botswana through their joint venture, Botswana. They were very effective at working with that. So Botswana should be okay because it has the currency reserves. But the longer this goes, the more danger people are in, both countries. But generally speaking, both are in far better shape than South Africa is at this point when it comes to where they were before the lockdown and where people are now. And as far as job losses and loss of income, both are in far better shape. So sorry to digress there, Gideon, but it was a super chat, so we got to do that. Let's see. Now let's see if we get 1,000 super chats asking me about Donald Trump and other things. Anyway, but moving on. So Yanni said he knows the answer, but he wouldn't mind asking if Gideon, if you wouldn't mind talking about hollow points and that it's legal and cops should not give you nonsense. Oh yeah, he's trying to make the point. So are hollow points legal in South Africa?
Absolutely 100% legal. Now, the confusion about it stems forth, I think, from a bit of, I don't think it's malicious misinformation. I think it's genuine ignorance. The cops aren't allowed to use hollow points in SA, not for any specific reason. There's no directive. There's no rhyme, reason, or logic. The reason is they're only allowed to fire state-issued ammunition through their service weapons. The only ammunition that the state sources and supplies them with is FMJ. So they can't go with their own money to a gun shop and buy Winchester Ranger Ts and then carry that on duty because that's not allowed. That's prohibited for them to do. And some of them think because they're only allowed to carry FMJ, that civilians are also only allowed to carry FMJ, even though the shelves are filled with hollow point defensive ammunition that's legally imported and legally sold. So my question to people always is, well, do you think this is just really expensive range ammo? Or do you think there might be more to this than meets the eye?
Yeah, no, that's no. It's so easy for people to give the wrong impression about things. It's fascinating, particularly when it comes to firearms. You see all sorts of nonsense. I don't get a kick, but I find it hilarious when I hear that there's no gun control in America. We need more gun control. I'm like, have you tried to buy a gun? It's not like walking into Walmart. In fact, you can't buy guns in Walmart anymore. They stopped carrying them. Dick's Sporting Goods stopped carrying. Guess what? You know the last time I went into a Dick's? I don't recall. I stopped shopping there when they stopped selling firearms. Not because I buy firearms from them, but I didn't appreciate their political stance on a perfectly safe consumer product that in a state that's overwhelmingly conservative, with the exception of Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, a state full of people. There are state game lands within a few kilometers of my house. People go hunting for deer and turkey and grouse and all these places. You can go at any time in season, anytime in season. And now these companies are making political statements and making it difficult to become a gun owner, and it's not their place to do that. So anyway, kind of irritating.
But I'm sure the brick and mortar gun shop down the road is very grateful that their competition are taking themselves out by their political sort of views. I don't know.
Actually, it's a good point you're going to make. That you make there, and I was going to bring this up perhaps later. Is that in fact this political correctness by the big national change is self-defeating, because not only do I not shop at Dick's for my sporting goods anymore, I won't be going there to buy a firearm. So when I do buy a Sig Sauer or I buy a new firearm, I'll be going to a local mom and pop place and supporting local businesses at the expense of the national change. They like the virtue signal, and I don't think they realize just how big a deal the Second Amendment is in the United States, and just how many gun owners are out there who are lawful gun owners who think that they're just so full of manure that their eyes are all brown.
Yep, no, exactly.
Now, Toon said it's shocking the needing to take weapons to worship. Yes and no. In the context of safety, you got to be cognizant of what's going on around you. Unfortunately, we've had a few places of worship attacked here. A synagogue in Pittsburgh a couple years ago by a mass shooter, and then we had this black church in South Carolina. That happens on occasion, but normally people don't carry them here. But I mean, that's not an unusual occurrence. I mean, a century ago, people out in the prairie in the Midwest would go to church with their firearms. That's just what you do. You went everywhere with your firearm. It somehow became something we didn't do as a normal circumstance for a lot of people. But there's nothing wrong with it as long as you comply with the law.
That's it. And I think there's a bit of a faith-based misunderstanding, perhaps. Now, I know a lot of church ministers, a lot of them carry guns quite happily to church, to their own church service. And I asked them, I said, well, look, do your congregants have an issue with it? Because I get this a lot when I speak about people carrying guns to church. And I get told, no, but it's a place of worship. It's the house of God, all these sorts of things. I say that is true. But firstly, I'm not aware of there being any Christian argument against, carrying a gun to church. If we're going to make an argument like that, and we say, well, okay, are you carrying your medical aid card to church? Do you exempt church from your insurance policy, your life insurance policy, all these things because of because it's some sort of hallowed ground? It's a weird philosophical take. I understand where it comes from. I just don't agree with it. Ultimately, if we're going to go down that road, God gave you a brain and intelligence to understand how the world works, and you are a sentient human being with the ability to do your own risk mitigation. Use those faculties because you have them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So we had another super chat from the Flying Boar. Thank you once again. A $5 Canadian super chat. And he said, what happened in South Africa? It's more of a statement than a question. What happened in South Africa, including gun control, defunding police and military, is what's happening in America. It's kind of hard to argue with the general scope of that. There's certainly an effort here. Nonsense. I mean, one of the things about about being in uniform in Africa is whenever I went around, you'd see a lot of Africans in countries that when they see in uniform, regardless of who you are, they kind of shy away. They don't want to be near the military. And that's because they've been abused by the military in many of these countries. Yeah. And so I don't intentionally engage civilians and say, hey, what's wrong? Hey, you shouldn't be afraid of military. I'm like, yeah, but the military, they kill people, rape women and stuff. I said, no, that's not the military. Those are thugs in uniform. Thugs in uniform are not professional military. And so I intentionally engage people, but it's shocking because what I would say to them, I said, because you get these idealists that live in a fictional world where, well, we don't need military, we don't need police. I said, I would love to live in that world. Put me out of work. I'd be glad to go work in IT or work in tourism or something like that. I've got skills in those places. I can make a lot more money doing that than I do in uniform. But the reality is that the nature of human beings, someone will always try to take advantage. Someone will always try to abuse, no matter how you inculcate values in a society. You're always going to have people that live outside the norms because they choose to, not because they have to. Exactly. And then what happens is that the reality is if you live in the real world, in this dimension, you cannot have a world without police to ensure public order, and you cannot have a war without military to ensure a nation is safe. But these people live in a dream world, so you have to have police, and defunding police is just insane.
It's an interesting take for me as well, because if you look at the breakdown in trust between the police and the communities, my question to a lot of people is, but okay, where were you when you needed to hold your police accountable? Why did you just... There's a lack of active citizenry almost everywhere, in the sense where, okay, the cops exist. I'm just going to make all the societal problems theirs, and I'm not going to hold them accountable for anything. And I'm not really interested in what they do. And then ultimately you leave that for a couple of decades, and all of a sudden you sit with a massive problem. Now you're not talking rationally and going, okay, maybe we should look at police reform, and maybe I should get up off my ass and actually be involved in my community and try and figure out why we have these problems and are they real. It's this humongous knee-jerk response that says break the entire system down, it's all bad. And you go, okay, let's agree. Let's say it's all bad. It's to a large degree your fault as an inactive citizen who didn't take any responsibility for their role as a citizen of the nation or the country or the county or the state, that your institutions have turned into these things. There's no introspection from these people at all. They just externalize everything, and you can't have a constructive conversation with anyone like that.
No, they're not interested in a constructive conversation. They're interested in yelling at you and demonizing you and trying to delegitimize you. And it's exhausting to try to have a legitimate conversation with folks like that. So Herman van Staden asks, Chris, what do you think of the R4 M4 versus the R4 versus the M4? Not a lot of thoughts on it. It's a derivative weapon. That's not bad or good. It's just a reality. So not really many thoughts on it. Do you have any thoughts on that? You have any knowledge on the comparing the R4 versus the M4?
I've a good friend of mine's got the civilian version, the LM4, and I do like it's a fun gun. I do like it, but if I had to choose between the two platforms, I would definitely go M4 for several reasons. One, okay, both shoot the same caliber. Mm-hmm. The R4 is heavy for the caliber it shoots. It weighs almost the same as an FN FAL, which shoots full 7.62 NATO.
Which is quite heavy. The FN is quite heavy. Yeah,
quite heavy. It's a full-blown battle rifle. So you're not saving much weight by downscaling to the R4, and you're shooting a smaller cartridge. It's the M4 is much easier to put modular attachments on, whether you're talking optics or whatever else. And did I mention it's a lot lighter? I think I did, but let me just re-emphasize that it is a lot lighter, a lot. And ultimately, that makes a huge difference, a much bigger difference, I think, than people give it credit for. But as a military, you carried rifles, you marched, you know far more about these things than I do. So
no, listen, I want to get your take on it, and that's I'd pretty much say I've not carried the R4, but because I've been on sidearm for a number of years now, but no, I would agree with that, and weight is a major consideration when you're carrying 70 pounds on your back with a rucksack, or you're carrying a radio with batteries, you're carrying a GPS, you're already in boots with a Kevlar and body armor. You know, you might come in weighing 120 pounds. But then you put all that stuff on, you weigh 260. You know, it's a lot of work to labor, especially in 40-degree temperatures with, oppressive humidity. So it's a consideration. So any weight you can save, and the standard NATO round of 5.56, that does the trick. But you're right, there's a big difference between 7.62 and 5.56. But the FN is a heavy weapon. I would not have wanted to carry that in combat because that was it's a fine weapon, but it's one that as a soldier I would prefer to have something lighter. And just take my chances with that. I'll call for fire from artillery if things get bad.
Yeah, I was about to say, no, it's a heavy thing. We had a sport down here called sports adventure shooting, which I participated in a few level 1s, level 2s, and part of it is you have to do a route march or a route with everything on you, your entire kit, including the rifle, and did mine with my FN FAL, and it punished me. It's doable, but you exert yourself far more with it. And I'm probably going to stir the pot horribly now by saying this, but between the R4 and the M4, the M4 is a better produced and better designed platform. It has an undeserved reputation of unreliability, which is not true. It's bloody reliable. It's maybe not as idiot-proof as the simpler designs. There are certain components to it that require a bit more TLC and a bit more thinking of, but ultimately, that's, in my opinion, better design.
I'm not chuckling, Paratus, at your comments. I'm reading the chat, which I think you're seeing now. It's Sloth Puppy says the R4 is heavy but can take abuse. True. The M4 is great if you look after it. 5.56 found deflected off bush a bit, so you like the 7.62. Yeah, but I'm not trying to use my rifle to take out bushes or take out armored personnel carriers. I use other things for that. So yeah, I get the point. But Morton Christie says 5.56 is for muffies. R1 is a proper rifle. Now, bear in mind, Morton is a guy that's giving you grief about your comments, your purported comments about the other sidearm there. Yes.
But to be honest, between all the rifles I own, my FN FAL is probably my favorite. As heavy as it is, I'm absolutely, to this day, still in love with it. It is just, there is something about it that just, I don't know, invokes something in me, and I can't quite put my finger on it.
Well, listen, when it comes to Morton and Nigel and Robin here, these guys, they're old hats at this and may have carried some of these weapons in the bush. And so I have to trust their judgment on it. Robin is an old roadie, so he knows what we're talking about here as well. So, Yeah, interesting. Now, there was a super chat I need to catch up on, but before that, Toons asked a question. Paratus, what's your take on military weapons depots getting robbed? But let me get the super chat because the Flying Boar sent another super chat of $5 Canadian, said gun depots are being robbed in South Africa, yet law-abiding gun owners are not allowed to own firearms. So what are your thoughts about weapons depots?
So there's been more than one instance where not just a weapons depot, but an actual, I think it was one of the infantry bases in CT, Cape Town itself.
Yeah.
Don't know if it was 8 SA Infantry Battalion. I'm speaking under severe correction, but they actually got robbed, like held up, and had a whole bunch of automatic actual assault rifles, not left-wing terminology assault rifles, like real assault rifles stolen. There were big stories about the arms depot in Jan Kempdorp, which is up in the Northern Cape, effectively being an unguarded depot, and the fences falling apart, and people can just waltz in and take what they want. There've been regular thefts and robberies from naval depots at Simonstown, where, I mean, hand grenades and anti-tank stuff went missing. It's a huge issue. The state in SA are terrible custodians of their own weapons. I did a bit of research about 2 years ago on numbers in the public domain that were released to Parliament, and per capita, the police lose at least eight times more guns than civilian firearm owners do. And civilian firearm owners include security companies who are not necessarily always all that proficient, and who also get robbed and have negligent people there. So if I had to include only armed civilians, excluding security companies, that figure would be even more atrocious in comparison. The cops would lose even more. Then someone earlier asked a question about why is it so difficult to get a gun in SA? The short answer is there has been a civilian disarmament agenda in SA since before 94, but I mean, it
picked up
escalated.
Pace. Yeah.
It picked up pace after 94. And the major issue is that they knew they couldn't do this in one law. So they made a sort of restrictive law, but that had all sorts of hooks, and they would have amended it to make it worse every couple of years. It's thanks to gun owners fighting back that didn't happen. The war at present is it's doable. You can actually license firearms. It's not as bad as it sounds. Unfortunately, it sounds more of a complicated, but that's why my platform exists. My platform exists to help people go through this and give them information and explain how to do it. Because I want as many responsible, law-abiding people as I can. If they want to be legally armed, please do. Go for it.
Well, on that note, listen, Yanni or one of the other moderators, if you don't mind, if you could stick Paratus's channel in there so people can go check out his channel and learn a little bit about this. And I'm going to get to a question here shortly, but I did want to cover a couple more comments here that I came across in the chat. Excuse me. Sorry. So, yeah, I'm all excited about this. Sorry. Yanni says that he was telling Morton Chris that the M4 shooting 5.56 was not designed to kill per se. Unlike the R1 M4, 5.56 can hurt someone in the Army, and you need two people to assist, so you take three people out of combat. Actually, there's a lot of truth to that story. When you're in combat, if you can wound somebody, then you lose three people because they got to drag them off, and it has a tremendous impact on reducing the efficacy of an infantry unit. And then, but Morton's response to me was the 7.62 knows the difference between cover and concealment. The 5.56 does not. To which I would say, Morton, the 50 cal tops all of them, and that's what I carry on my vehicle when I'm in combat, a 50 cal. Of course, I'm not allowed to shoot that at personnel. That violates the conventions and norms of war. But when you hide behind an armored vehicle, it's not my fault if a stray round hits you. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
And then here's a real question here. Thank you, Yanni, put in the link to his channel once again. Marius Krukamp said, please ask Gideon where I can retrieve the application forms for firearms needed. I think it means 9 millimeters. It says 9 mile ASAP.
Okay, so the SAPS website has all the forms on it. You can Google apply for firearm license, and you'll get the SAPS form. Let me just tell you which SAPS form you need to look for. I don't know it off by hand. Let me just type it in here, and I'll tell you exactly which one you're going to need to find, because they all have their own funny numbers. It's the SAPS 517 form, and you can actually download it off the SA Police website. So SAPS 517, sorry, that's application for a competency certificate. That's your first step. And then to apply for the license, sorry, is a SAPS 271. That's the application for license to possess. But I've got a video on this on my channel. I've got some other resources that'll help on my website, which is paratus.info. It's very easy. In fact, hang on, it's on the side of my cap there. So please, and get in contact with me. All my email addresses and stuff are on there, and I'm happy to help as much as I can. Really, that's why I'm here.
Excellent. Listen, Gideon, we're coming up at 1 hour. Some of us do stream surfing, going from one channel to another. Can you stay a little bit longer? Because I want to talk about your business, or do you have to take off?
No. I can stay a little bit longer.
Okay,
that's
good.
Not a problem.
Let's do. I got another super chat I'll address, and then there's another really good question came from Lynn. So let me get to that. So another super chat from Flying Boar. Boy, you know, Flying Boar, you're carrying all the weight here today. You're doing this you're solo on the super chats. Thank you for that. But he does that frequently. So, of course, I'm assuming it's a he. It might be a lady. You never know. You can't assume, right? South Africa is taken over by China. That's why they are taking guns away from citizens. It's a communist takeover. I don't know if that's the issue, but I would agree that it's definitely a paternalistic attitude, and it's definitely a totalitarian outlook. And I think it's hard to argue that the ANC is not a totalitarian-focused party. Gideon?
That sounds pretty accurate to me, because I just had to engage my brain a little bit about it as well. The thing is, we have a very, very, very unhealthily cozy relationship with China. Mm-hmm. Having been in the fortunate position to get an invite to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's little gala thing where government officials came and spoke, what's also very clear is that the U.S. still exerts huge influence over the political direction in South Africa. And I think one of the few things that is preventing us from plunging into other failed African states that are all China and none of the other is the fact that our relationship with the US is as developed as it is, because Uncle Sam does still very much crack the whip to a degree. It's not just Beijing. So that's one saving grace, I think.
Yeah, actually, one of those big sticks is the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which in sheer numbers doesn't look major to South Africa, but it has a major impact on employment, particularly in the auto industry and wine industry and other things. But what people don't know is that virtually all of South Africa's exports to the United States arrive in this country duty-free. So if you own a BMW in America, the odds are that the replacement part came from South Africa in the Eastern Cape, not from Germany, where they have to pay import duties to bring it to the U.S. So that's an important consideration. The U.S.'s ability to influence the ANC is not as good as I'd like it to be, but it is certainly not non-existent. The public surface tensions are for political purposes, the disputes that we hear, but what actually happens behind the scenes is very different. And having served in diplomacy for the better part of over 2 decades and worked in 8 embassies, I can attest to this. What you hear in the news or what you hear state leaders say is not what's happening behind the. Sometimes it is. But oftentimes you may hear a lot of rhetoric that sounds quite serious. In the meantime, substantive work is being done in the background. So that's an important consideration. Interesting. Folks, you're listening to Chris Wyatt Africa on the Indaba Africa channel here on YouTube. It's my regular Saturday live stream, and my guest today is Gideon, who's a commercial airline pilot. But courtesy of the Wuhan coronavirus COVID-19 hysteria and the shutdown of commercial aviation in South Africa, he finds himself wanting to get behind a stick and not having a plane to get behind at the moment. He is a gun enthusiast and a gun rights advocate in South Africa and works in a gun shop. We're going to get to that in just a moment here, but thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you following the channel and watching us today. So Lynn had a question, but there was a comment from Eugene Rudman first. Eugene said they recovered some of the weapons stolen from Simonstown Navy on Red Hill. Turns out it was the son of a senior naval officer and some of his buddies. That does not shock me in the least. Oftentimes, in Botswana, one of the problems we have is we have these I'm forgetting the name of it now, but you have a situation where you have a police officer or a military soldier who's kind of lost it in a relationship, a Romeo thing, and has a significant other who is broken away from them or doesn't want to be part of them, and they steal a gun from the armory and they go and they murder their spouse or significant other and then sometimes commit suicide. I forget the name of that, but that's a common occurrence because military and police, if you can't trust them, that's not good because they have access to weapons. And it's easy to get to them. Now, Lynn asked a question. How do you handle an inherited firearm in South Africa? Is there a process for that, or what do you do?
There is. It's it's an estate firearm. It basically becomes the property of the estate, and there's a bit of a paperwork process that I don't know off by heart, but it's not that complicated, and your local firearm dealership should be able to help you get through this so that you can then either sell it or license it yourself, or however else you want to go about it. But estate firearms are only a problem because people are intimidated by there is a bit of a process to it, but it's definitely doable. Not an issue.
Cool beans. Now, Brett Sessoms, who's a huge fan of not fan, fan is short fanatic. No, but he's a big supporter of this channel and also of Ronaldo host program, which I think he's more in love with than my channel. So Brett is asking a very good question. He wanted to know if you served in the South African Air Force as a pilot before you went into civil aviation.
No. I was a private sector baby from the start. So no, I never did any military service or police service. The closest I came to police service was got through the reservist selection process, and then the SAPs kind of didn't understand how part-time training works while I was still working full-time, and the whole thing just kind of fizzled out. And but that's one of the reasons why I think they lost 85% of police reservists in the space of 5 years because they mismanaged the system so badly and the program so badly. So unfortunately not.
I've got a super chat here from the Flying Boar. I'm going to get that in just a moment, but there's a couple really good comments I've got to cover. So Morton is in rare form today. Not that he's not ever in rare form, but Morton has said that it was easy in the old days, especially if one was a policeman. He said he never paid more than 400 Rand for a firearm. We would just buy the guns you guys stupidly handed in. License was no problem. Now, I will say here in the States, those things are destroyed. They're videotaped. I'm sure some are pilfered. We watched, Lethal Weapon 2, where supposedly, or 3, whatever it is, guns are stolen, that sort of thing. But the reality is that they're normally destroyed. I guess they weren't destroyed in South Africa, so the cops could buy them.
That seems like a very civilized approach, to be honest.
Sure, I'm laughing. I'm not going to complain about it. But Bad Brad asked a question: does a DUI, driving while under the influence, disqualify you from gun ownership? Well, I can't answer that fully, Brad, because we have 50 states, 4 territories, and the District of Columbia, so 54 jurisdictions, and it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And it also depends on what type of DUI you have. Some states, depending on level, it's a felony. I believe in other states it's a misdemeanor. It just depends. So I really can't answer that question fully. You'd have to ask about a specific jurisdiction, and honestly, I'd have to look it up. I don't drink and drive, so it's never been a concern for me. No, seriously, when I was a young soldier, I watched all my friends go from private to specialist to sergeant, and they went one night out to the Dixie Club. Had a couple beers, and the MPs were waiting outside the base in Germany, and they drive in the German streets. They pull them over because they're Americans with American license plates. You're blowing a thing, you get arrested, and they go from sergeant back to private again. And I said, you know what? That's not the path I want to take. So
no.
I once drank a couple of beers in Birch's Garden. If you know Birch's Garden, it's deep in the Alps, all mountains, beautiful place. That's where Hitler had his eagle's nest up there. Wonderful place to go skiing. So I was in Birch's Garden, and my friend was supposed to drive, and he disappeared. And he had the keys. He was not supposed to drink. I was going to have a couple beers. I had like 2 beers. Over a few hours, so not much. And I finally found him, and he was 3 sheets to the wind. And I'm like, you're not driving. So I got in the car, and I drove down the hill to the train station because we were looking for a third friend. We left him in another club. And I got down to the bottom of the hill, and I got out of the car. I parked it. I locked the doors. We went in, found my friend, and we started walking to our hotel, which was about 2 kilometers away. He's like, where are you going, man? The car's right there. I'm like, we are not getting in that car. He was like, yeah, but you're okay to drive. I said, nope, I'm not okay to drive. And that's the only time I ever came close. So I have a personal rule: 1 drop, no drive, which means I almost never get to drink. So I don't know the rules in DUI. I don't really follow them much, and hopefully it'll never be an issue for me. But it's a good question about gun ownership. What about in South Africa? If you get a DUI, do you lose your right to have a firearm?
If you get convicted, now I'm speaking under severe correction here because I'm not legally trained or qualified. There are disqualifying criminal records that disallow you from owning. You basically you are declared unfit to possess. Mm-hmm. I'm not 100% sure if there are actual criminal records that are soft that allow you to still possess, or if they're just the ones that you have to expunge, and then you're fine. You can carry on per normal. But ultimately, there was a reason why there's this trope that we are the most law-abiding segment of society, is because the penalties for behaving like a criminal is you lose your right to, well, your in South Africa it's privilege. I hate calling it that. I like referring to my right to keep and bear arms, but yeah, you basically lose it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So I got a couple of super chats I got to address here very quickly. Give me a second here. And then I'm going to put something in here from Tion, which I want to address and ask your thoughts on it. So the first one was from Flying Boar again, gave $10 Canadian. Says, I live in Canada, but it pains me to see what's happening in South Africa, which once was a beautiful and prosperous country. He doesn't say most, but which was once the most beautiful and prosperous country in the whole of Africa to now a third world state. Well, listen, I echo the concerns, Flying Boar. I'm not a South African, and I've been going there for decades, and the direction it's taken in the last decade, especially, but certainly in the last 3 years since Cyril Ramaphosa, the supposed savior with Ramapalooza and the Ramaphoria, came to office, which I didn't fall for, by the way. Go read the things I wrote 3 years ago. I didn't say that. I wasn't a sucker, but not that anyone else was. But I'm also concerned about it. So Gideon, what are your thoughts about South Africa? I mean, was it once beautiful, and is it in jeopardy now, or is it just okay and people are being hyperbolic?
I think the Republic is, for want of a better word, permanently broken. I don't think after what's been done to it now with the economic decline, and this is a sort of a situation where we would need far more principled, intelligent, and inspiring people to lead us out of this type of black hole we're in. And the leadership capacity for that just doesn't exist in the ANC. Yet at the same time, I don't see them really convincingly enough losing a national election that the far-reaching reforms that are needed could be implemented. So what we're looking at right now is, if the Western Cape succeeds in seceding, which there's a method to doing this that is internationally recognized and that complies with international law, that's the thing that needs to happen. If the Western Cape can secede and other parts of the country can break up and do its own thing, then we can save some of it, and perhaps later more of it. But as a unitary republic, no, it's not going to work. Like, I think we've tried this experiment and we've accelerated the outcome thanks to the lockdown, where it would have eventually ended up. And from here we need to find a new way forward, because carrying on like this ain't going to work.
So we got a super chat from Brett Sessoms, and this is a question to you, Gideon, and then also a statement. So I'll read the statement first because it's afterwards. But it says, for our information, South Korea has donated 5,000 masks to South African Korean War veterans and their family. That's very nice. That's a lot of gratitude. South Korea actually has never forgot its support it got in surviving the onslaught from North Korea back in the Korean conflict. One of the reasons why U.S. and Korean relations are so good, despite what the press says about Donald Trump and South Korea, it's been a long, fruitful relationship, even in times when the country was not particularly democratic. It was autocratic. But now South Africa is a thriving democracy, one of the best economies in the world. And thank goodness that's where I get my Samsung and my phones and televisions from. But anyway, so Brett said that. That's nice. Thank you for sharing that, Brett. I think I saw it in the chat, but didn't get a chance to get to it. So thank you for the super chat. But his question to you, Gideon, is how heavy is crime in the city where you're located?
I would say it's pretty average on the South African scale of violent interpersonal crimes. Cape Town's murder rate's off the charts high, but the primary reason for that is the vast majority of homicides are restricted to a handful of specific areas. And that's mostly gang-related stuff we're talking about here. Now, gang violence is its own animal. Mm-hmm. If we had to unpack it, we'd probably be here all night. That's a show in its own. But that's the major driver for the extremely high homicide rate Cape Town has. It's gang-related, hugely.
Absolutely, and a lot of it takes place in Kaisheta and in the Cape Flats. That's where most of that stuff is happening. Not exclusively. It happens in posh neighborhoods and downtown and central businesses too. But your odds rise exponentially if you find yourself in the Cape Flats or being a victim of that sort of nonsense. It's really
absolutely
sad. Brett asked another question. I'll throw this in because he gave another super chat. We haven't got to it yet, but he was just curious if you've ever driven the right side of the road. I imagine you have because you've been to the U.S.
I've driven on the right side of the road, not in the US, but in France and a couple of African countries when I was doing contract work up there. Mm-hmm. And that's about it. France and in Africa. So I have.
So I mean, what's it like? I mean, does it feel better driving on the correct side? Do you feel right?
It was interesting. It took me about a good day or so to get used to it. And traffic lights are fine, stop streets are fine, yield signs are fine. It gets really interesting at a traffic circle, especially in France, because you're now looking for the traffic to come from the wrong direction and everything goes in the opposite. Like you're going from clockwise to counterclockwise or the other way around. And it just, that messed with me a little bit. Took me a bit of time to figure it out. But yeah, ultimately it was all right. It was fine.
Yeah, no, I tell people that when I was in Botswana, if you think it's difficult, try doing this. I get in my left-hand drive Toyota 4Runner, a V8, by the way, which is awesome for Africa. And I drive from my house to the embassy compound on the left-hand side of the road, and it's an automatic because you couldn't get it in standard. I get to the embassy, I check in, I go to my office, grab some things, and then go out and get my government vehicle, which is a Toyota Land Cruiser, an African one, and I switch over to the right-hand side with a standard transmission, and I'm shifting with my left hand. I'm left-handed, so I like my left hand to be free. And so you go from being a left-handed 1 minute to just literally a minute later driving the other side and going from an automatic to a standard. And then I throw on top of that the fact that the turn indicators and the windshield wipers are never consistent from models from left to right. So on the left-hand side, it may be on the left-hand side, and the same on the right-hand side, or it may be the opposite. So you have to know that specific vehicle. So I'm forever losing cool points when I get a higher because I'll put the turn indicator on and then my windshield wipers come on, or I'll put the wiper on and my indicators come on. But anyway, that's a first world problem, so we won't worry about it.
Definitely.
Now, Brett threw a super chat here for $4.99. Thank you, Brett, for the super chat. It said Germany massacred the Herero and Nama tribes in Namibia. It was not the first genocide of the 20th century. The British massacring the Boers was in the Second Anglo-Boer War. Okay, fair point. Thank you for sharing that, Brett. But there are other things. The Majimaji Rebellion, which took place after that in Tanganyika, was another one. One could argue it was a genocide. It was certainly devastating to tribes in Tanganyika. So interesting. Do you know? By the way, Gideon, do you know any of these histories? Do you follow any of this history? Are you interested in history at all?
The Namibian one, yes, very much so. And my own, I'm busy with 2 books about the Anglo-Boer War at the moment because I felt the need to just go over that stuff again. One was actually General De Wet's own written account that was translated and kindly uploaded to Amazon in Kindle format, so I could read his memoirs for a full $1.25, which I thought was a steal. And I've got quite a few books on African history because this continent is fascinating. Pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial, and how everything just sort of fits together. Yeah, you could spend, if you had to focus just on African history, you'd probably not get time to really read anything else, but you can.
Yeah, no, good point. So let me get a few more of the comments in here, Gideon. Folks have been very active in the chat today with some great questions and comments. This was Tion earlier said, Bad Brad, any criminal conviction should disqualify you. However, if you can prove you need a firearm to earn a living like a hunter, you can get it back. That's interesting. My comment on that, and Gideon, I'll get your thoughts on this, is that I'm very circumspect about saying any criminal conviction because people are convicted for all sorts of things that are minor offenses that are just criminalized by the state. So, for instance, like right now, what if these people during lockdown, if the things that have been declared unconstitutional are not in fact kept unconstitutional because the government's fighting that. They're trying to make them constitutional again, so they're appealing the decision. But let's say this couple who were in Cape Town who had that their toddler daughter, and they were out walking when the lockdown was lifted on the beach, but you couldn't get off, you couldn't go on the beach, you could just walk on the sidewalk, and the child was misbehaving, so she sat down and breastfed her there. They arrested them, took them to the police station, putting them at risk, throwing them in jail with a toddler, threatening anyone who came to pick the child up with imprisonment as well. Now, that guy may have a criminal record. She may have a criminal record, and so they can't own a firearm because they sat on a beach. Come on, so I'm exactly. I'm kind of circumspect about any criminal conviction. Look, a violent criminal conviction or something that's tied to a mistrust issue, that I don't have a problem with. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, and I think that's also the thing. If it's a violent conviction or anything pertaining to fraud, you're automatically disqualified. I think if it's something that's a softer, like, if you can call it victimless, in the sense where you didn't assault somebody or where you didn't commit a type of dishonest fraud, you probably won't necessarily be declared unfit to possess. But there is a big issue that's going to explode hopefully next week about this whole lockdown criminalization story. Mm-hmm. So if people could just keep an eye on it, I don't know when or how, but I saw something that was sent to the president, and then from there things are going to develop. So just keep an eye on it. I'll tag you in it, Chris, as well when I see it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Please do, because that'll be something I'll cover. And in fact, maybe I've talked about this, but I'm hesitant to do a new video about it until we actually get some more facts, because it's just supposition. I prefer to deal in facts and then offer the analysis. So, yeah, really quickly. So Philip van Vellebergen, he actually commented on this before we got to it. Said crimes of violence will cause a magistrate to declare one unfit to possess a firearm for a declared period as part of sentencing. Police can deem unfit on frequent irresponsible conduct. Okay, yeah, so I think that's pretty much along the lines of what you said there. But as long as there's a provision, if it's not violent crime, that you can restore those rights, and it's a real process. It's not they just say it's a process and then they kind of prevent you from getting it. Kind of like the Chinese, our market's open, but then they create artificial trade barriers so you can't ship anything to China. Same sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, as long as that happens, I think we're okay. And then he also said a little bit ago that, now this one's a little puzzling for me, not sure where he's going, but he said the ANC's own numbers publicly announced 100 tons of small arms of their armed wing missing. I assume he's talking about MK from before the war, or anyway, or before the new dispensation. SAPS says 10,000 guns and 10 million rounds are missing. I guess from the SAPS. That's pretty scary.
Yeah, no, this is, there's a lot of struggle era arms caches and ANC guns that are missing. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, one of the things is you never know how many they had to begin with. Yeah. So that's a problem with this. Is what I always found funny when people say to me, "Okay, but do you know how many illicitly owned firearms are in South Africa?" I said, "No, there are estimates.
Nobody knows.
But it's not like the criminals register what they have, so we can nicely keep track, and tick the boxes. It's not how this works.
It's like illegal aliens. There are 10 million illegal aliens in the United States. Really? How do you come up with that figure? There are at least 5 million illegal aliens in South Africa. That's my estimate. How do I come up with that figure? I'm using data that gives me the ability to project that. Is it correct? No. Is it close? I think it is. But we can debate that. But the point is that you can't get reliable figures, because who knows where these caches are and how many were there and the condition they're in now and how many were bought. And the ANC doesn't even know, because different people were responsible for different things at different times. And because of the nature of cells, not everybody knew about it. So there might be, in somebody's farm somewhere, crates full of AK-47s or AK-74s from China sitting out there, and God knows what condition they're in. Good point. Yanni made a point here. He said, and this is back to what you talked about earlier. I think it was the distinction that you were trying to bring up about the privilege to own a firearm, and you're saying the right to own a firearm. And Yanni, because we were talking firearms yesterday, and he said yesterday he didn't make that point. It's a privilege. So yeah. But I think it should be a right. But that's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, and I can explain why I also think it should be a right.
Please do.
If you think about it completely rationally, without having to drag too much of a philosophical debate, all firearm rights are fundamentally, and I might be wrong, but this is my opinion, fundamentally found on the foundation of self-defense, whether it's self-defense against private sector predators like criminals or public sector predators like a tyrannical state. It's your right to defend yourself. Firearms are a fundamental part of effectively doing that. Mm-hmm. At the same time, your firearms also protect your right to self-defense by putting you in a position to do that. So it's kind of like a what you call the symbiotic relationship between the right to keep and bear arms and the right to self-defense. Self-defense in turn is founded on, if you're a South African, your constitutional right to life. So you've got a constitutional right to life. You've got a constitutional right to bodily integrity. If you can't protect, if you can't defend those rights or protect those rights from being infringed upon, then they become essentially meaningless. And nowhere is it stipulated that it's the state's responsibility to protect you, because they can't. It's physically impossible. So my concept of why I believe in the right to keep and bear arms is, without those things, how do you defend yourself effectively? How do you protect yourself effectively? We saw what happened in the United Kingdom, where they do not have a right to life. They don't have a constitution with a Bill of Rights like we do. They banned firearms. The first thing that happened is the homicide rate increased immediately, and it took them years of additional police expenditure to bring the homicide rate back down to pre-ban levels. The same thing happened in Australia after the National Firearms Agreement. I think that was in 1997. Wherever this model has happened, Jamaica was probably the worst one of them all, with the most dramatic increase. I think their homicide rate increased by 300% in 4 years after they banned there was a de facto ban on civilian firearm ownership. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's the long and short of it.
Yeah, the problem with all this is that the facts speak for themselves, but you're not dealing with people who care about facts. They care about hyperbole, and for whatever reason, they want to disarm people. And to me, it must. I guess let me relate this experience and see if this makes sense to you. I get your feedback on it. So when I went in the well, no, I mean because this is a military experience, and I'm in a civilian voice as somebody that respects and values the firearm. So and how dangerous they are, and how you have to be responsible. So when I went in the Army, I went to basic training, and I've told this story to some of the folks on my stream before. But when I went in the Army, I went to basic training. Firearms, no big deal, man. Grew up with guns, you use them, went hunting with them, went to turkey shoots, all kinds of things. And I went to the range, and I watched guys who were terrified of the range. The sounds, the weapons themselves, they didn't want to handle them. And it was almost like they were shaking. And I was like, what's wrong? I mean, I didn't say this. I was a young kid. I'm like, what the hell's wrong with you, man? It's a rifle. Get a grip. It's not like you're carrying an artillery piece on your back. But it stemmed from the fact that, of course, in the Army, you bring people from all over the country. And not most, but I'd say probably about a third of the people in our basic training course were from inner cities, urban areas, where they didn't have a culture of growing up with guns and gun responsibility and respecting it, knowing about it. So all they knew a gun as is something the criminal had or the police had. And so it scared them. And it scared them to the point that we had to work. I mean, the drill sergeants had to work with these guys to get them to be able to fire. And to me, that was kind of sad. I mean, I think people should know about firearms and understand. It doesn't mean you have to have one, but just understand it, because otherwise, I mean, that's a pretty scary way to go through life, being scared of guns.
Not only that, you might not have a guarantee that this happens to you, but chances are in your life you might encounter a firearm somewhere. And if you don't understand the basics of gun safety, you might have to deal with the situation, but you're not equipped, not emotionally, not mentally, not with knowledge, not with skills. That's just an undesirable situation altogether. I mean, it's a bit to me like people who own a car, but they don't understand how to change their own spare tire. And it was a shock for me to find out that these people kind of exist. I mean, no one taught me how to change a tire. I taught myself how to change my spare tire, and every car is different. But it's this weird sort of, I don't want to say it's a nanny state consequence, but people want to be babied and spoon fed, and that just in real life it doesn't work. It just doesn't.
Sorry, to me, I thank you. That kind of stems, I think, this expectation that the state exists to take care of us. And that's pervasive around the world. And I don't understand why people think that's the case. All the state does is get in our way. We only created states to look out for our joint needs, defense, security, those sorts of things, and not to give handouts to people. I mean, that's what faith-based organizations are for. That's what community-based organizations are for. You take care of the less fortunate in your community. You don't look to an outside entity to come in and take care of it. It's not personal. It's disconnected, and it's also not effective. People throwing and showering money from above. And it also leads to a disconnect in which those people from above find it easy to steal and pilfer or misrepresent or lead you into conflicts abroad that you have no interest in being involved in, that sort of thing. So it always strikes me as why do people think the state is the answer? And now we see in this country the irony of people saying the state's the answer, but then they're saying deconstruct the state. Okay, the state's the answer. It'll take care of it, but now we don't want a state. What do you want, anarchy? We had that a century ago. In the turn of the 20th century, we had anarchists. An anarchist assassinated President McKinley. They were all over the place. It's just insane. I mean, do you think I'm off base here or what?
No, maybe. And I was just having a chat to a friend of mine who actually stays in St. Louis. And he has an interesting background story. He has several degrees in fine art and ended up not being able to get a real job with those because those shocker. So he worked security for a long time. And he kind of knew the McCloskeys because he guarded their neighborhood for more than a year. And he's got a very cool take on it. He said to me, look, maybe what needs to happen in a place like Portland or in a place like Seattle is, they don't want federal courthouses and U.S. Marshals to come in there and restore law and order, then pull the federal plug on those cities and say, fine, you don't get funding, you get nothing. You're on your own. It's almost like a soft secession. Good luck. Let us know when you want to come back, and see how it goes as a sort of petri dish experiment, because there's no rhyme or reason behind any of this. It's ridiculous.
Well, but the problem we have with that is this: is that the malicious use of the courts, and then judges who are appointed by a different president, federal judges who fail to adhere to the law, to respect the Constitution and make decisions. And because we follow the rule of law, we listen to the judges, even though their decision is irrational and not based in law, until it's appealed. And so, like, for instance, when Donald Trump, who has all the purview over national security, issues a ban on travel from 7 countries because they cannot prove the provenance of the people who they're giving passports to. And as was reported to the Obama administration, these are countries where terrorists are coming out of. And so, we should not be taking anyone coming. So he puts a travel ban for those 7 countries, and it's described as a Muslim travel ban, which it was not. Indonesia was not on the list. 236 million Muslims in Indonesia, and every Indonesian can come here. The 100 million Muslims that live in Europe can come to the States. That didn't affect them. Muslims from South Africa can come here. The point is that they lied about it. They went to a federal court, and he stopped the president of the United States. And of course, they called Donald Trump a tyrant, and he's out of control. He's a loose cannon. But what did Donald Trump do? He adhered to the court's order, even though it was unconstitutional, because he respects the rule of law. Then it was overturned, and then the Supreme Court steps in and puts conditions, which is nonsense. He has total purview under a Constitution. But that's what happens. And that's so when they try to cut aid to sanctuary cities, federal justices or federal court appointees said, no, you can't do that because it's unconstitutional. You can't deny money to. No state is entitled to any money from the federal government. It's not in the Constitution. This is fabricated out of whole cloth. So no judge can say that you can't do that because it's not in the Constitution. If it's not in the Constitution, unless you've passed a law, and if the law is there, but there's no law that says you must give money to states that don't comply with federal rules. And so if you're forced to give money to these people who break the law, who want to secede, that's just insane. And that's kind of the situation we find ourselves in today.
Yeah, no, exactly. So
can you imagine this? It's like mind-boggling.
No, it's giving me a headache. I'm not going to lie. It's
I'm getting one too.
It's a next level. It's a case you go like, okay, what do you want? Okay, you want this, we'll give this to you. Okay, that's not good enough. What more do you want? And the goalposts just keep shifting and shifting and shifting and shifting and shifting because there is no real plan, because there's no rationality. It's all emotions, and emotion will be different at 6 p.m. than at 10 a.m. And it seems that that's just how things work in Portland and in Seattle at the moment.
Yep. Well, listen. We could go all day, and I'd love to, but
Exactly.
We've been at it 90 minutes. So I have a bad habit of not always let my guests go. I don't want to do that to you. So let me get to one question here really quickly and get your thoughts on it, because it was an interesting question. Not that they weren't all interesting questions, but let me get to this, and then we'll wrap up and get some final thoughts. And if I can get a commitment from you, would you be willing to come back on the program and talk about this issue again?
Absolutely, I'd love to. Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
All right.
Very much enjoyed
it.
it.
It's been a blast. I can't believe it's been 90 minutes. I mean, next thing you know, people will be bringing us pizza because we have to eat at some point. But if we can get a pizza, COVID-free pizza. But hold the anchovies, hold the COVID. Anyway, but yeah. So sorry. And then honestly, can I get you back again if you don't mind? Can we talk about the aviation industry in South Africa, because that would be fantastic. I
would love to.
Okay, we'll do that.
Please.
All right, so we'll schedule for those things. So. Topsy Cuts said, asking me, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it. What's your opinion on technically losing your Second Amendment right when you make a health decision to obtain a medical marijuana card? I'm not aware that you do lose your Second Amendment rights. Maybe you do in certain states. My answer to this on the surface, without knowing any facts or a specific case, would be that if you have a need for medical marijuana, it shouldn't preclude you from having a firearm as long as you're legally capable of getting one. Otherwise, you're mentally sound, you're not a felon, that sort of thing. So I don't think it should affect that. What I would say, though, is that if someone has a medical marijuana certificate, I wouldn't be opposed to special firearms training and certification for people who are required to take medication like that. Because I don't know if you have to take it 24 hours, you just have to toke 24 hours a day, or if there's certain times you're using it. So I think there might be maybe some restrictions or limitations that might be reasonable, but it shouldn't preclude you from owning a firearm if you're not a criminal. What are your thoughts on that one, Gideon?
No, exactly. I don't know. Look, I don't know enough about the long-term psychiatric effects of using it, because that would be my primary concern. So, okay, if this is going to give you psychosis, which could be debilitating, the onus is ultimately on you to be responsible about this and make sure that that you are not putting yourself or other people at risk. But you should not be disarmed because you have a medical condition and your medication or your treatment is slightly unconventional. well, ultimately everything becomes conventional if you do it for long enough. So yes, um, but no, you shouldn't be disarmed for that. And like I said, I wish I knew more about it, but those are my initial thoughts on it.
Yeah, sorry, Gideon. I wasn't smiling about what you were saying. I'm reading the chat again, and I think a lot of my viewers get a kick out of my sense of humor and the phrases that come with, because the last couple of days people just repeat them. So Lazan's laughing her butt off because I said toke 24 hours a day. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday in the stream, I said someone was butt ugly, and people were still laughing about that one. And anyway, just some of the things I say, they get a kick out of it. So I coined the phrase hashtag sack of cock. People love that one. So anyways, that's what I was laughing at. But and just let's get this one really last quick one right here. But your thoughts on this. But General Inflatable said, are guns cheaper in the USA than South Africa? Well, that's kind of a hard question to answer. But I would tell you that I guarantee you that I can pretty much get a sidearm in Africa pretty much anywhere, but especially in South Africa, probably by going to Hillbrow and pay 100 Rand for it, a lot easier than I can here in the U.S.
Yeah, but if you're going to legally get it, it's definitely cheaper in the States. Definitely.
Yeah, that's true.
Cheap.
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
All right, Gideon, listen, man, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for being my guest today. I hate to cut it here, but I hear a lot of dishes in the background on your side, so I don't know if that was an indication it's time to go eat or what. But
yeah, I have to go eat. Yeah.
But thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it, and good luck with your channel. Folks, check out Paratus, his channel on YouTube. Yanni has put it in the stream a couple of times. Maybe one of my moderators can stick it in there right now. And if you're looking for information, he's got some videos on how to become a gun owner in South Africa, how to be a responsible gun owner, how to get qualified for it. So, hey, can you any final thoughts before you drop off?
No, but what I'd like to say to people, if you want to go on this journey, like to help you, get in contact and we'll take it from there. And it's not as bad as it looks or as you think it is. It really isn't.
Cool beans. All right. Thanks a lot, Gideon. We'll catch you on the other side. Thanks a lot.
Perfect.
All right, folks, as Gideon drops off the stream right there, let me go ahead and say thanks to everyone. Just can you leave the meeting, Gideon?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I can do that for you.
Yeah, that wasn't
I thought
clear.
I was going to go to the one.
It's a failure on the part of the host.
No worries. Cheers,
Okay.
everybody. Thanks, Chris. Bye.
Bye, Gideon. Oh, there he goes. Okay, folks. Hey, thanks a lot. Listen, thank you, everybody at Flying Board, to Brett Sessoms, those who gave super chats. Really do appreciate it. I had some new subscribers during this stream. Thank you for that, guys. I hope that you found this an interesting stream. I enjoyed this. It was a very interesting discussion. We left a lot on the table, and we'll get back to that with Paratus, Gideon, on a future stream. I'm really looking forward to talking to him about aviation in South Africa and in Africa in general, which is a fascinating topic. For those who don't know, my grandfather was a aviation pioneer. He was a barnstormer back in the 1920s and 1930s. He knew Amelia Earhart, Wiley Post. He worked for Howard Hughes. He worked for General Jimmy Doolittle when he was in the Army. And famously, he flew a lighter-than-air dirigible at Bolling Air Station in D.C. and crashed it as a young enlisted soldier. And that was the end of enlisted soldiers piloting dirigibles for the U.S. Army. But my grandfather later was an aviation pioneer, was part of the OX-5 Society, which was one of the earliest successful commercially available engines for early aircraft, the OX-5. Do a Google search on that. You'll learn about it. But my grandfather was a member of that society, and he was the lead engineer on the tail assembly for the Saturn V rocket to launch the Apollo missions into space. So how cool is that? Having said that, I met my grandfather twice in my entire life, so I didn't really know him. But that's the nature of families and domestic relations. But anyway, yeah, pretty cool stuff. So we'll get Gideon back on the program to talk about aviation, and I'm looking forward to that. We'll also talk more about firearms, gun rights, and gun responsibility. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your patronage and for your super chats, for your comments in the chat. This was a brilliant stream. I really enjoyed it. My guest was wonderful. Thank you so much, Gideon. Really enjoyed having you on there. Check out Gideon's channel. It's been put in the stream chat several times by Yanni and other moderators, and learn a little bit about his channel. Please go support his channel. I think you'll find it interesting whether you're in South Africa or here in the States, or if you find yourself in Hong Kong. Just check it out. And I'll go ahead and I think I'll do a Night Owls edition of the live stream later today. And we'll update folks on news and discuss some of the comings and goings about what's happening as events unfold around the world. Thank you so much for tuning into the live stream, my regularly scheduled live stream here on a Saturday on Chris White Africa. Tomorrow, folks, I have Gareth Mason. For those who don't know Gareth Mason, Gareth is a super rugby enthusiast and a sports fan from South Africa, from the Eastern Cape. And he's got a huge channel on rugby in South Africa. So we'll be talking all things rugby tomorrow with Gareth Mason. That's a special feature at 12 noon on the East Coast of the United States, 6 p.m. in Botswana and South Africa. Sunday, August 2nd. So that's my guest tomorrow, folks. Got more guests coming up next week, but that's one we got scheduled for now. What's this? Would bipolar exclude you from owning a firearm? Linda, I don't think that would be a problem unless it was clinical diagnosis that said you weren't capable of it. But I'm not an expert on it. We'd have to ask the authorities where you register a firearm. But that's a good question. Maybe you can ask it again when we get Paratus back on the channel. All right, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. If you can make it back later on in 2 hours from now at 21:35 in South Africa and Botswana, and at 15:35. Sorry, I'm still in the Army in my mind. 15:35 here on the East Coast of the United States. I'll be doing a Night Owls edition on a Saturday. We'll just relax and catch up with the news. So thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate it. We'll catch you guys later this afternoon here on Chris White Africa. Have a pleasant evening, folks. God bless, and thank you for being part of the program. $92 likes. 92. Smash the like button. Go ahead. You know you want to do it. If you haven't pushed it yet, smash the like button. Thanks a lot, folks. Have a lovely evening.